Spoke all about this earlier with Ben Shapiro, Daily Wire co-founder and co-host of The Ben Shapiro Show. Just looking at this Minneapolis situation, given the coverage that you and I have both done over the last couple of years, last decade now, really on the left and the way that they've organized, I see this as defund the police 2.0 combined with a very far left, almost communist agenda that they're carrying out in Minneapolis with the organizing, not just protests where people show up with signs, but the tracking, the doxing, the signal chats. What is your assessment of what's really going on right now in that city?
You know, it does feel like a chaos operation. It feels very, very organized. Obviously, it is designed to impede federal law enforcement, and not just to impede federal law enforcement, but to end with some tragic situations like the ones that we've seen in the past couple of weeks involving Renee Good and Alex Preddy. The more of these ugly pictures people see on their TV, the less they like ICE doing its actual job. And I think that that is part of the goal here. Obviously, the people who are arriving at these points are not there, as you say, to protest. They're there to actually obstruct the implementation of federal law. And once you're doing that, you're engaged in violation of law. And that means that whatever happens next is going to be risky and could be dangerous. And I think that that is part of the point. I think that a lot of the people who are organizing this stuff know that going in, even if many of the protesters / obstructionists actually don't. I think that a lot of those people seem to be cosplaying the revolution and then seem to be surprised when that meets with actual force from federal law enforcement.
Yeah, it's interesting to watch the martyrdom that's coming out of this. When you had the lieutenant governor telling protesters to, quote, put their bodies on the line. We have literature from these activist groups passing it out in their training manuals to do exactly that. And then when you see it happen and there is death involved, terribly, tragically, there's then martyrs for them to point to and say, see, this is what's happening with ICE. We've seen that play out in other countries, and now we're seeing it happening here in this playbook that's being used in Minneapolis.
I think that's right. I think it's a weaponization of American sympathy in bad situations. And this is one of the problems with a camera-covered society, is that because the job of law enforcement is always going to require use of force, and because that use of force is very rarely going to be fun to look at or pretty to look at, that means that the more you can put those pictures in front of people, especially pictures involving terrible situations like Renee Good or an Alex Preddy, the more people are going to reject the entire infrastructure of what ICE is trying to do. And this is what you see a lot of top-level Democratic officials doing. They're not saying this is a tragic circumstance. They're saying ICE should pull completely out of Minneapolis. ICE should apparently stop pursuing even criminal illegal aliens. ICE should apparently disband. Well, that's a form of state nullification, and that's a violation of federal law and the basis upon which the country continues to operate. And so what you're watching here is ideologically unbelievably dangerous.
Yeah, well, I want to ask you about the personnel changes. You know, the president has now taken Border Patrol Commander Greg Bovino out of Minneapolis, has sent Tom Homan in. There's some talk from people like John Fetterman, senator from Pennsylvania, Democrat, about Kristi Noem needing to be fired or to resign. Is this overblown, or do you think that the personnel shakeup will help the president continue his operations while you still have the mayor of Minneapolis saying that they're not going to comply with federal immigration law on the local level?
You know, I don't think anyone understands optics better than the president of the United States. I think that he is legitimately the best in the business. And so when he looks at the problems at the top of DHS or at the top of Border Patrol in terms of their communication strategy, and he says this is a bad communication strategy, I think his instincts on this are correct. I think that one thing you cannot have is leaders of our law enforcement community making what appear to be false statements about tape that we can all see. And so when you have Kristi Noem or when you have Greg Bovino saying that Alex Preddy, for example, arrived to massacre federal agents, and then you actually watch the tape, and it doesn't appear that he's attempting to massacre federal agents, I think that creates a perceptual gap that is very dangerous for ICE. It means that people don't trust federal law enforcement, that they don't trust investigations of federal law enforcement, and that means that you're going to get more resistance. It means that you're going to get more ugly situations in the streets. If the Trump administration wants to facilitate trust in law enforcement, which clearly they do think, I think, need to move aside people who have done a poor job at communicating the mission of ICE and also being clear about what exactly ICE has done and what investigations will take place. Tom Homan has been very responsible in his rhetoric. I cannot say the same for the Secretary of Homeland Security or for Greg Bovino over at Border Patrol.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.